I am back with a bottle of Belgium's finest in hand.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of ParaNormality. My name is Harry and with me, as always, is James. It's nice to have you back.
Hello there.
And we are doing a special episode today because we have a guest. We've got a guest.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the show.
A guest.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
I absolutely. So I'm Mike. I am the host of the UAPsAndYorkshireTea Podcast. As you can probably tell, my accent differs ever so slightly from these two. So we've got a wonderful bit of North and South working together.
Gravy and curry sauce.
Yeah, absolutely, gravy and curry sauce. Wonderful. I'm a recovering secondary school teacher with an unhealthy obsession with UFOs, and I'm delighted to be here.
No, it's really good to have you. When we first started this journey, the title is Bob Lazar. So the person that we wanted to speak about was Bob Lazar. And just prior to us recording, we were talking about the dynamic of the show. And James, prior to 2 weeks ago, had you ever heard that name?
No, not at all. I thought it was like a laser tag owner.
I think that's just
Lazar
such a perfect response, because that's exactly the appeal, isn't it? He just sounds like the mad scientist from Independence Day, kind of crossed with
James the nutter that puts a jet engine in the back of his Honda.
Yeah.
His name kind of sounds like Bizarre, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's got everything that you want in your archetypal mad scientist story.
Lob Bizarre.
So, before we get into the main crux of the show, thank you everybody for listening to us. Last week's episode is already our most listened to episode.
Fantastic show.
It's really, really enjoyable to sit down with James and to terrify him every week. It's really fun. This episode is going to be a bit of a departure. Yeah, for me it's fun. This episode is going to be a bit of a departure from what we normally do, but I'm really excited for it. But if you do enjoy the show, we would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend, with a colleague, with someone who maybe isn't too aware of the phenomena, and you think maybe getting to know some of the more famous cases first, so the Nimitz especially, and the Alderney case.
Spread that UAP love.
Show it to someone who might be teetering on the fence of wanting to get into the subject. Because
UAPs to the UAPs.
UAPs to the UAPs. There you go. Send it to your nan. Follow us on Twitter. We are at PodNormality. You can follow us on Facebook, which is just ParaNormality Podcast. We're not on TikTok yet. We're not on Instagram because we're not hip and cool enough. And frankly, I don't have the time to do it.
No.
There's my first bleep of the episode. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Share it, follow us, do all of that stuff. We've also got merch, which is weird because I've completely forgot that I did that. And we've also got a section. If you go to our Twitter page or you go to our link tree, it's linktr.ee/paranormality podcast. You can ask us a question. And we actually had a question come through via this sort of like method of communication, which was really cool. I wasn't expecting it. I put it on there, the Q&A section, just to sort of think, well, maybe someone might come forward to us or someone might have a look at the show and want to ask us a question. And we actually got one. So we have had a question. Well, not a question, more of a comment from Trey. I'm so sorry about this. Miyuna-chan? Trey Miyuna-chan. I'm really sorry if that's the wrong way to say your name. And they said that the USS Nimitz encounter is very similar to the Sao Paulo State 1986 encounter, where two separate radar installations spotted multiple objects. Will you be talking about that? Yes. Yes, I will. It's in my plans. Don't worry. So that's sort of all the housekeeping wrapped up. James, do you want to jump into this then and talk about Bob Lazar?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't know about this guy until, last thing you told me we're recording about Bob Lazar?
10 days ago.
So 10 days ago. And I spent the day just, I'm guessing, watching the most popular side of the sort of coverage that he has of himself. So the Rogan podcast and that recent, I don't know how recent is that documentary they did about him.
The Jeremy Corbell interview. Yeah.
Can I just ask you
documentary.
guys, what's your take on the Mickey Rourke commentary?
I laughed probably the entire way through.
I'll be honest, I love Mickey Rourke, but he has the voice of a man that's been punched in the face all his life.
Yeah. It was like trying to gargle gravel while trying to talk about it kind of reminded me of watching Sin City without the fun parts. Like,
the thing is, I love the story behind why he's the voice for it. So basically, there was a recent Joe Rogan episode with Jeremy Corbell, the director of that film, who was also in the Bob Lazar podcast with Rogan.
Oh, is he the one with the crazy eyes?
Yes, and he basically said that
he's the guy that looks like he should be on every MMA podcast that's ever been.
What's his name? What's his name? Jeremy Corbyn?
Corbell. Jeremy Corbell.
Jeremy
Corbell.
I know it wasn't Corbyn.
He basically, he wants to make UAPs free for everybody.
He's got an issue with nukes.
He's just best friends with the IRA.
Second bleep. So he basically said that the reason that Mickey Rourke is the voiceover for it is because it was like a week before the film was going to premiere, and he just didn't have anyone to do the voiceover, and he went to go and get a tattoo, and Mickey Rourke was just there, and he was like, "Do you want to voice over my UFO documentary?" And Mickey was like, "Yeah, of course I do. I want to do the voiceover of the UFOs." Really sorry, Mickey Rourke. Please.
I'm guessing once he asked Sylvester Stallone, then he went on to Mickey Rourke.
He'd obviously never had the delight of watching The Wrestler.
No. That is a great movie.
I mean, it is a good film. It should have given you the clear indication that Mickey Rourke should not ever be, narrating a UFO documentary.
So, James, your sort of like intro then to Lazar was 10 days ago. Me saying the next episode is with Mike. Put your head in the book.
Like I say, as we discussed before, it's always nice to go into these things with a relatively low knowledge of what I'm about to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah,
as you really aptly put it last week, an empty head.
Yeah, just an empty head.
He said I'm going to go into this empty-headed, and I was like, okay, yeah, fair enough, James.
Yeah. What better place to start when it comes to
really like that.
Big Bob?
What else does open mind mean?
Well, no, it's just normally it's like open-minded or just empty-minded. Just made me laugh. I don't know why. So my sort of introduction to Lazar is about 7 or 8 years ago when I really started to like laser focus my interest into UAPs, and his name just came up everywhere.
It's the laser focus. The Lazar focus.
The Lazar focus. So his name came up everywhere, and I watched sort of interviews with George Knapp, and I watched some of the original interviews of him on, is it WKLA TV?
Yeah.
I think I've butchered that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with George Knapp, and then I just sort of like got into like just the mythos of this man, and then obviously he was on Rogan, and there was the documentary that came out, and it piqued my curiosity enough to then make me look further into it, which we'll talk about once you've sort of like chronologically gone through his sort of like rise to infamy as such. But what about yourself, Mike? Where did your sort of like fascination with him begin?
To me, I mean, the first thing that I ever saw when it came to ufology was on Channel 4, kind of 1989-ish, and I just remember, and it will never ever leave me, this blacked out guy speaking as Bob, because he's fairly unmistakable. He's got that kind of voice, and he's under this pseudonym of Dennis, and he's coming from some kind of Japanese TV station, and he's literally just telling the most magnificent tale of all, to me anyway. This is just the most magnificent tale of all time. He's giving these details about working at this secret base called S4, which is a kind of sub-district of Area 51. He's worked with
overlooking Papoose Lake.
Papoose Lake, yeah, which is the hangars are kind of like hidden and drilled into the rock bed, and it's just got all the elements of the greatest story of all time, in my opinion. And yeah, it just piqued my interest straight away, and I'm like, I just need to know what this guy is about. Who is he? What's his story? Yeah. And that's I think what we're at 1989, so I'd have been 6, 7-ish. I'm a bit older than you guys. And I just could not get it out of my head. Obviously, it's 6, 7. Your imagination's running wild anyway with most things in life. But this just really, really struck a chord, and it just got me into it.
So Bob Lazar was literally like your introduction into UFO and UAP.
Now, a lot of people will say, Roswell, Corona, and, everybody's got their own story. But to me, it was always Lazar, just fascinating in every way.
All roads lead to Lazar.
Absolutely. And away from Lazar, unfortunately, in a lot of ways as well.
So he's a contentious person to speak about.
Contentious is definitely the word. I mean,
it's why I wanted to bring the subject up early into us recording, starting this podcast, is because we've got Nimitz, we've got Alderney, we're gonna do Betty and Barney Hill, but I needed to get Lazar sort of in our repertoire straight away.
Absolutely,
yeah, definitely.
He definitely belongs in that box of infamy, doesn't he, when it comes to ufology?
Yes. 100%. Now, James, are you aware of any of the controversy that surrounds Bob Lazar and his claims at all?
Just like I said, from what I watched today, it does seem to be. It's got on for 1989, so however long that was
30
ago.
years,
yeah, and it does seem he seems reluctant, but also happy to talk about it at the same time.
I get a lot exactly what you mean.
I get, from what like I said, I know minimal, like empty-headed. I know minimal about it, but from what I've watched, he seems convinced that it's happened, which is great. That's his opinion and stuff. But for a man that wants to be hidden, he's not doing it very well.
It's an odd. His entire existence is just one huge contradiction.
Yeah, and like you said, that interview with in the back of the van, he called himself Dennis. Wasn't that the name of the supervisor at the place that he worked, the S4?
Dennis was his handler.
Yeah,
Barry,
so
Barry was. Oh yeah. Sorry, Barry was his kind of lab partner. Dennis is the kind of tough, kind of stereotypical Tom DeLonge-esque kind of military guy who handles him and never allows him.
He walks into the laboratory like, "Where are you?"
That's it. That's the one.
I was wondering. I that clicked up. I was like, did he do that on purpose? Do you think
he did? He admits it in his autobiography.
Oh, okay.
He actually says it's a little bit of That's it.
I would say then
that voice would have been so much more appropriate as well.
I would say that's as good a place as any then to start, because you are a self-confessed Lazar lover. Like you
I'm not sure that
love the story.
I just love the mythology
story of it,
behind Lazar, and that's what it is to me.
So this is going to sound daft, but for people that aren't too aware of the Bob Lazar story, why don't you take us back to the beginning, back to S4, the start of his journey, and then just take us through where he's gone, what he said, and what's gone on since then, up to even modern day. Because Jeremy Corbell showed a video a few weeks ago that we will obviously talk about as we come nearer to the end of the show. But sort of where does his story start then?
Well, to me, his entire story is like something that you would just read in some kind of, bizarre fiction, science fiction novel. The typical kind of mad scientist kid growing up. He's born 1959 in California, Coral Gables. He's a bit of a geeky kid, and that kind of transfers into adulthood. By the time he's in his early 20s, he's driving around in this jet-powered Honda that's getting him a fair bit of notoriety. Now, where it all starts getting a little bit almost mythological is how he gets the job in the first instance.
Now, what job is this? Is this the job at S4 then that you mean?
This, before he gets the job at S4, he gets a job at Los Alamos as a particle physicist. But it's the story behind that you just can't not love. So Edward Teller, father of the atom bomb, is giving a lecture. Bob goes along to the lecture, and obviously this guy's despite the fact he's created weapons that's just killed hundreds of thousands of people, Bob puts him on this incredible pedestal, and he comes out of the lecture, and guess who's reading a newspaper with a picture of Bob and his jet-powered car on the front? It's Edward Teller. Now, Bob, being the opportunist that he is, and if you've ever gone into his financial background, which I have, and by the way, that's available to anyone who wants to view it online, his financial history is, let's just say, it's a little bit of a sticky wicket for Bob.
I do have that Reddit page that you sent me, Harry, up of Bob Lazar's story about hundreds of thousands of debts to people.
Yeah, mostly his parents. He owed his mum and poor mother and father an absolute fortune. Seems to like cars, buys lots of cars and defaults on lots of cars. His financial background is a bit shady to say the least. But back to Teller. So Teller is outside, and Bob thinks, wow, he's reading a newspaper and I'm on the front. So it's kind of like one of them. Teller's reading the newspaper. Bob's kind of peeking over the top as if to say, look, it's me. I'm that picture. That's
Guess
me.
who?
Yeah, it's me, Edward. Gets on first name terms, puts himself forward, and he actually says to Teller, that's me. That is me on the front. I'm Bob Lazar. I'm a physicist at Los Alamos Lab. Give me a job. So Teller says, yeah, do you know what? I'll hook you up, Bob. So then Bob obviously does the logical thing and begins a photo printing company, as you do.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's a natural step from hydrogen bombs.
Yeah. So
one thing that I do just want to jump in. Just one thing I want to say is that a lot of people talk about his story, and when they mention sort of that meeting and that give me a job, okay, yeah, I'll hook you up. A lot of people write that off because, well, that's not how people get jobs. But I've had job offers before from just conversations with people, and it was something that happened a lot in the 70s and the 80s, was people were given jobs just on the basis of being on first name basis with people, because contract law was very different 30 or 40 years ago. So I did just want to cut in.
Yeah, no LinkedIn either. No LinkedIn.
Yeah,
it's not.
Obviously, that is a point that people sort of point at and say, you're never just going to be given a job because someone recognizes you from the paper. But contract law and how employment worked 30 or 40 years ago, massively different. So that is something that I do believe could happen.
I like to think that's just like, oh, my uncle owns a fishmonger. Like, he's got a Saturday job going, rather than working for the hydrogen bomb guy.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
What I loved about the story is just the fact that he's reading and there's a picture of Bob on the paper, and Bob's like, this is my chance. It's just it's just wonderful. Like, what a story. It just could not be any more perfect. And then for him to just go, right, okay, it's time to set up my, photography business. And 12 months later, he's bored and thinks, do you know what? I really, really fancy working back with the science community. I'll give Ed a ring, see what's going on. Naturally, Ed's just like, yeah, I remember you. Honda
You're that
guy.
nutter with a jet engine in a Honda.
Yeah.
Remembers the haircut, remembers the glasses, and he's like, yeah, you're in.
And no one had brown hair and glasses back then.
It was a very unique look.
Very unique.
Not Bob Lazar, brown hair and glasses. There is only one Bob Lazar. I'm sorry.
Next time I go to a barber's, give me the Bob Lazar, please.
Oh, can you imagine? Do you know what?
I'd pay for you to do that.
I ain't ruining my purple Mohican.
Do you know what? In 1989, I think I had the Bob Lazar and glasses look.
Just by accident.
Just purely. Or maybe Deirdre Barlow, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, so it kind of moves on from there. He's brought into this special access program, and he meets Dennis.
Dennis.
Now, you must have heard of the secret, the secret flights that leave from Los Angeles.
Yeah, we spoke about that last week. Are they called Jane flights? Is that what they're called?
It's Janet. Is it Janet's? It's
Janet flights.
Janet flights. So all the employees from Area 51 are apparently packed on a Janet flight and then flown out, and then they get off. And he describes in, again, such wonderful detail, getting off the plane at Area 51, being bundled into a blacked out school bus, which again, it just perpetuates every wonderful element of this story. He's blindfolded, stuck on a blacked out bus, and he's driven to this secret facility where he's just kind of thrown a couple of packs of briefing papers and told, read these, take your time, digest what we're telling you, and that's it. Kind of does tie in a little bit to the Barney and Betty Hill, because obviously it's back to the Zetas.
Yeah, Zeta Reticuli is mentioned, isn't it?
Yeah,
It is, and their controlling interest in humanity from, I think he quotes 10,000 years plus. He's shown body parts, autopsy pictures, and he's given a kind of breakdown of their kind of controlling interest in us and the fact that they've manipulated human DNA. It's the traditional Grey story, the traditional Grey backstory, which has obviously been around for a long time. So obviously his mind's a little bit blown, and then he's taken to meet his lab partner Barry, and they have this brilliant conversation about why Bob's there, because Bob's kind of like at this stage, well, the people are more qualified than me. What am I doing here? And Barry's just like, yeah, you're replacing a guy who were blown up messing about with trying to cut into one of the reactors. So Bob's like, awesome, cool.
Yeah, welcome to the job. Here's your hard hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, in a nutshell, he regales him this story of they've used some kind of laser cutter. They've tried to cut into one of these reactors from one of the ships, and there's been some huge nuclear-sized explosion, and several scientists are just vaporized, and Bob's come in at short notice to offer a different perspective, and that's what I love about it. This huge organization who apparently know nothing about vetting employees, because that's the thing about Bob, like his background and his credit. This is another area. I mean, I am not in any way, shape, or form dismissing Bob's story, because my conclusion is that I'm just not sure, and I kind of find myself varying as to whether I absolutely 100% believe it or think it's just the worst story in the world. But Stanton Friedman, you'll know Stanton Friedman.
Yes.
Basically a god in the world of ufology. Unfortunately, not with us anymore. He made a really, really big effort to look into Bob's background, and the credentials was a massive, massive problem, because he basically said that he got a master's from Caltech, which is kind of like it's kind of like a red brick style universities in the UK. Masters in electronics, and he's got a degree in advanced physics, and none of this has ever checked out, which is a problem. Obviously, when you rock up at probably the most secure military installation in the world, and you are asked to work on otherworldly technology, and you can't even prove that you've got a degree, it does become a little bit problematic. And Stanton, to be fair to him, did a really, really good job in researching Bob's background. Now, it's George Knapp. Again, you're not going to find many more people credible in the world of journalism. Absolutely backs Bob on everything, and basically says a little bit like you were saying, Harry, but we're going back 30 years. These checking systems aren't quite as rigorous as what they are now, and George's take, and Jeremy Corbell's is always and has always been, well, sometimes people fudge the backgrounds to get the job, and it's like, yeah, but not really when you're working on tech that's...
Yeah, it's a big difference between, like, I've put on a CV before that I had, like, GCSE A maths instead of GCSE B maths. Like, obviously an employer's not going to ask to see your GCSE certificates. There's a big difference between that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then a master's degree from one of
Caltech.
The highest, from one of the highest institutes, technological institutes in America, when there's no record of that.
And also applying for a job at Area 51, like you said, the most secure, pretty much place on the planet, and they're not going to go, I trust your word of, I'm going to trust the word of this guy with a great haircut.
Yeah.
It's
the thing is, though, one thing to remember...
It kind of stinks at the moment, if I'm honest.
One thing to remember, though, James, is that Bob Lazar made Area 51 famous. So before this, Area 51 wasn't a thing. It wasn't a big deal. So it's not like going there now and getting a job. It very much was just seen as a military facility. Like,
I thought you were being sarcastic. This is actually...
no, genuinely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Bob Lazar is the
he puts
reason
it on the map.
Bob Lazar is the reason that Area 51 had 100,000 people show up, Naruto running at it. Like, he's the reason that all of pop culture now for the last 30 years is obsessed with this site.
Yeah.
because of him.
Now I see why his infamy's there.
Yeah, so yes, it would be ridiculous to think that some guy could just walk into a military facility, but it's not Area 51 as we know it today. There are, like, even in the UK, there are dozens of military facilities that are top secret, that are kept behind lock and key. There's a military facility on Dartmoor, where we live, that had active nuclear weapons in the 80s. Anyone could have applied for a job there because it was just a government facility. So I don't think that it needs to be written off straight away that he wouldn't have got a job there because it's Area 51, because, yeah, it was Area 51, but that wasn't a big deal then. Like,
no, I didn't realise that. No.
Yeah. It wasn't a big deal. It was just another. It's the 51 area. There's 50 other ones.
It is literally just 51 on a map. It's literally an area code. It's a square of land that is part of a normal sequence of numbers.
There are thousands of these places all across America that have dozens and hundreds of people working at them, and Area 51 is just the one that we know of because of Bob Lazar. So, yeah, he could have possibly got a job there as an engineer or a technician by sort of like fudging a document or saying that he knew someone he didn't, or making friends with someone who was quite well in there. That shouldn't be written off because of the infamy that we have of Area 51 now. Because that's why we have the infamy.
And again,
it adds another layer.
It does. That's the beauty of Bob.
And I said before, I think I said in other episodes, normally when the government sort of like start putting barriers and, like, you know, redacting stuff or putting extra security, there's something there they don't want us to see.
Yeah.
So I think I said that it gives sort of power to that story.
And we do know that he worked there. We do know that he worked at that facility, because I'm sure you'll come on to it in a minute, Mike, but there is evidence that he worked there, whether you believe the evidence or not. Well, there is things to say.
It's evidence that's continuing to resurface over time, and this, no matter how sarcastic you can be about Bob, you can never ever truly write him off, ever.
Yeah, there's always whenever his story gets put down, there's always another little bit of information that will come out. And that's what's happened recently. But
Bob's story resurfaces every kind of, it's kind of chewed up every 4 or 5 years when there's something, just a different element. I mean, did you on the Corbell documentary when you brought in the hand scanner?
Yeah.
Now, badly done, by the way, terribly done, because Corbell kind of brought it in as though Bob wasn't expecting it. He quite clearly was, and then you got I haven't seen one. I can't believe and like
I
so
haven't
much
seen
of that
one of these
since.
I haven't seen
one of these since.
I never thought I'd see this again. I think is the line. Yeah.
Well, the thing is he has seen that before, because it was in a film. Like, it was in the 70s. So he has seen it.
Was it Close Encounters?
It was Close Encounters. It was in Close Encounters. That exact model was in Close Encounters. They were very well known. But how was he to know that they were used at that facility?
Yeah,
that's fair.
That's
enough.
the thing.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So there's a few little pointers. He's got a W-2 form, so a tax form that states that he was an employee of.
And he has a variant of a clearance badge that he used to access the facility. And actually, there's been something on Twitter this last kind of couple of weeks, and I'm trying to remember.
Is it the video that Jeremy Corbell shared?
It's someone else who is talking. Oh, do you know what? I've remembered. It's
someone that stormed Papoose Lake, isn't it?
No. It's this Richard Doty.
Oh, that's who it is.
Do you know that the background? I mean, Richard Doty is. If you're ever going to do another episode on,
we will do a Richard Doty episode.
I would love to guest on.
There's words that I would definitely have to bleep out if we talk about him
Paul
now.
Benowitz and Richard Doty. Wow, what a story that is. That's another.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another time. However, he has come online recently and said that he's got definitive proof that Bob Lazar worked at Area 51.
Show it. Show the proof.
I'm not quite sure. I wouldn't let Richard Doty. Yeah, I'd not let Richard Doty look after me goldfish. Never mind, give me definitive proof about Bob Lazar and Area 51. However, we'll
talk about Doty afterwards, James. By the way,
thank you.
There are people who give Doty credibility, but to me, again.
He's burnt his bridges, unfortunately.
He's very slippery.
But I thought that recently something came out that someone had been to Papoose Lake and had verified the claims of the bunkers as well. So there is a mixture of sort of like proofs and evidence. So he's got his W-2 form that shows that he was part of the, I think people complain about it because the wording of it was slightly different. It's like he's from the Office of Naval Intelligence, but it should be
about the ambiguity of the wording. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're saying that it should be the Naval
of National Security or
but then there is evidence to say that there was a Naval Intelligence Office. So he's got basically a P60 to say that he worked at S2 Area 51 facility. He's got the ID badge. He's got the description of the hand scanners being used. His name did actually show up in a call, in a like a yellow
phone
pages
book.
In a phone book. It did have a tag next to it to say that he was there as a subcontractor.
Yes, apparently you were a subcontractor for a company called EG&G, I believe.
Yes, it was. Yeah, so it did have a code next to it to say that he was there as a subcontractor, but still,
I've seen a lot of people argue that could mean he could be the janitor. But I mean, if you're the janitor at Area 51,
still there.
That does not mean that you're not going to see, miraculous, wonderful things. He just might have seen it as a janitor rather than a physicist.
He was there to clean up Barry's mate.
Yes. And then, to be fair, if you've read the autobiography, Barry does sound like the kind of guy who kind of needs his own cleaner. He's an interesting guy.
But yeah, there is these little crumbs that appear every few years. So first he came out and said, I worked at Area 51. Everyone ridiculed it. And then he came out with the W-2 form because he got busted for running a brothel, basically, James.
No. I wrote that down. Don't worry.
He had to show evidence of former employers.
I do believe I wrote down Bob tried to be a pimp.
Yes. Do you know what? And he would have absolutely pulled it off because he's Bob Lazar. He could have put the hat on and I'd have still kind of believed his story about UFOs.
Lazar's lasses. I get it.
Yeah. Wow, that would have been the best name.
But yeah, the thing with Lazar's story is that, like you say, every few years something else will come out. So at first he went to George Knapp and told his story and people didn't believe it. And then he took a few lie detectors. Personally, lie detectors don't do it for me. They're easy to escape. They're not trustworthy.
They're proven to be quite faulty.
And the one thing about Bob that you can say is no one can ever debate that he's not a clever guy.
Yeah, and also if you believe a story, a lie detector will say that you're telling the truth, regardless of if it's true or not.
Yeah, but that was my only thing that's the only thing. The thing I watched of Bob today was if you question his intelligence, it's automatic defenses. He gets insulted and he's quite smug and arrogant about his intelligence. And like they said, there's no dispute he is an intelligent man, but every time someone tried to question it, he came across as quite, not aggressive. But
there's always been an argument that Bob would never agree to a debate with an equal scientist. And I've never seen Bob argue science. I've heard him talk science, but never debate science.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that we will come on to it because obviously there's still more of the story. But there is a science-related thing that for me does raise a lot of questions. But like you say, he's working at Area 51. He's working at Papoose and S4. And he meets Barry and he works on a craft. So where does his story go from there then, Mike?
Well, he describes how one day he's taken through the hangars on this one particular day. The hangar doors were open and he sees 9 craft. He describes some as what he called the Jelly, the sport model, and he actually touches one because it's got an American flag attached to it. It's got the emblem on, and he's very quickly kind of basically threatened and told, "Do not do that again, or you'll die."
You're just a janitor.
Yeah. Janitors do not touch craft.
You clean floor, you don't touch craft.
So he's mopping away with Barry back in the lab, and he describes and I'm sure that the science. I mean, I'm not sure. My science is probably, maybe a B/IC GCSE kind of standards.
I'm quite sciencey. I like my science.
I mean, the science is contentious, and I mean, I'm sure I'm thinking that the point that you were referring to would probably be the element 115 and where it fits in terms of
Nuva, whatever it's like. Yeah, something I can't remember if it's
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, I'll talk about element 115 then very quickly. So Bob Lazar basically says that he's working on it's the sport model that he's working on. Was that the one that he was working on?
No, I'm not sure it is actually. I think he said he saw one that looked kind of like sleek and smooth.
Oh, and that was sport model.
To.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
No right angles, I believe he said.
No right angles.
So here's my issue with Bob the scientist. So he says that the way in which these craft work is through anti-gravity, which is totally, it is theoretically a possibility because space and time they're not a constant. It's more of a mesh and a field.
Yeah, they're
intrinsic. And if you can interact with those, you think of space as a big rubber sheet stretched out and you put planets and stars in and it stretches the rubber. So if you can manipulate the fabric of space in front of you, it's how I think the Tic Tac moves, is it creates something called a gravity well, which doesn't affect its inertia. It affects the gravity in front of it, and that's how these things move fast. And that is theoretical science that could work given enough energy to be produced to create these gravity wells. It's insane energy that you need to pull off this. It's something like 10 to the 15 or something ridiculous.
It is, absolutely.
It's obscene amounts of energy that you can't even get through nuclear fission. It's just obscene. And the way that he says that it works is that there was a sphere in the middle, and as you put your hand towards it, it felt like it was pushing away, almost
kind
as
of
if
like magnetism.
Almost as if like dipodes of a magnet that you're trying to put together. And he described it very much as the harder you push, the further your arms go away. Which it was made by this thing called element 115. Now he says that he has some 115, never showed it apart from a very quick smoky video. He's got some of this 115 hidden somewhere. And George Knapp has a video
in
of
the
it.
back garden,
Yeah, George Knapp has a video of it somewhere that he can't remember where it is. And
sorry, one of the most important videos to own.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it is.
And this is technology that would literally change humanity overnight.
So it's Snapchat.
This is literally, it's untapped, unrestricted, renewable.
Oh, it's absolutely
energy.
Zero. That there is no waste to this whatsoever. It is literally 100% efficient energy.
Yeah, and so the way that he describes it is it's something called element 115, and it was an unknown element, according to Bob, that nobody knew existed. But
which at the time was true.
No, that's the thing. It wasn't true. So if he even had a very basic knowledge of chemistry, he would know how the periodic table of elements works. And the periodic table of elements doesn't work as if you find something, you put it there. It is very predictable. So you know where things will be. You know where uranium and germanium will be. You know where mendelevium will be. You know where these elements are because of their proton configuration and the amount of electrons that they have. So you look at an element that is, say, 15, you know that will have 15, forgive me if I'm wrong, 15 electrons, and you know exactly the chemical composition of that element. Element 115 just means it has 115 electrons circling the nucleus, which we always knew would be a thing. It was never in doubt that element 115 would exist. The problem is that we just don't have any here. There's lots of theoretical elements that we don't have here, so we have to make them in particle accelerators. Somewhere like CERN in Switzerland, which is a giant particle accelerator that is firing individual protons at each other in high velocity impacts, using the most powerful magnets in the world, literally to launch individual, not even atoms, protons at each other at almost the speed of light. And by doing that, scientists in Germany were able to create element 115 for a microsecond before it decayed. Its decay half-life is so small that it physically can't exist for longer than a millisecond. Bob Lazar just says he has this somewhere in his house and he can't remember where it is.
And his explanation was just quite simply, it must have come
alien.
From a binary star system where heavier elements exist. Which
that is my problem with element 115, is we knew it existed, we knew it was a thing, but we just couldn't make it. And so there'll be an element 117, and there'll be an element 123.
Yep.
And if he... And my frustration with Bob is he's a very smart person. He put a bloody jet engine on the back of a Honda, but that doesn't mean he's a scientist.
Well,
and basic science is the periodic table. That's the very basics of chemistry. It's
the fact
day one.
That as non-physicists, we're having this conversation, and it's the level of science that, well, actually above the level of science that Bob appears able to discuss with any credibility.
Yeah, and this is just I'm a backyard scientist. I've learned all this stuff since I've left school. I've got an intense knowledge of physics and of chemistry. Not so much biology; it's all boring. It's just animals and leaves and cells.
Absolutely.
Don't care about that. But I do have a very, very strong interest in physics and chemistry that I've taught myself over the space of 10 years since leaving school. It's what I'm interested in. So when I watched that documentary and I heard him talking about element 115, it immediately put my defenses up. There's a lot of Bob's story that I believe. I do not believe that element 115 exists or that he has it.
Yeah, I mean,
so sorry about my rant. I had to get that out there.
It's a perfectly justified, and I think it's the biggest hole in the story.
For me, that is the biggest hole. You can talk about the fact he got indicted by the IRA. You can talk about the fact that he may not have worked there, or that he might not have been may have been a janitor, not this. For me, the biggest hole in the story is element 115.
I would have to agree.
But what moves on from working with Barry and looking at the craft and working on the reverse engineering, he goes and takes people out to Nellis. Is it Nellis? He takes people to Papoose, doesn't he?
Yeah, there's a specific area where it's now cordoned off, but you could access it publicly. It just escapes me at this moment. But basically, it's a vantage point out in the desert, and again,
it's since been reclaimed, though, hasn't it, by the US government?
It has. Yeah. But after what we've just been saying about the whole contradiction behind element 115, Bob's got a test schedule, and he knows when these craft are being tested.
Yeah,
and
he said when because that's when the less traffic is or something.
Yeah.
There's less traffic. The visibility's good, and I believe it's John Lear that he packs off into a. Lear's an interesting character at the best.
And that Robert Bungalow guy, wasn't it?
Yeah, the property guy.
No, I didn't. His second name just. I think.
Yeah.
Wrote it down as Robert Bungalow because.
Is it Bigelow?
I think it is.
No. The guy that comes with him is actually. We're actually a Las Vegas property developer, but I cannot remember what his name is.
Oh right, because I think that Robert Bungalow guy was on a Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah,
and he was talking about Bob releasing a balloon.
You're thinking of Bigelow, and he owned Skinwalker Ranch.
That's it. Yeah.
That was a different time.
Apparently, Bigelow, Bob did work for Bigelow, reportedly. Bigelow were really, really interested in his story, and apparently he did work with him, but with a lot of Bigelow stuff, it's never published or made public.
No, and it's not a simple story either.
No, not at all.
And he's definitely on cocaine.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I watched the entire.
Allegedly.
He's just a lot of. Yeah.
Sorry. It's that Tash. That Tash is a perfect coke broom.
Don't let us get sued. He is allegedly. All right.
Yeah. I do not want to get
bring it on Bungalow
by Robert Bungalow.
Yeah, I never said his name.
So, but they go out in this RV. They have a few beers. It just sounds like a boys' outing. It's like tonight we sat around with a few beers. We're talking Bob. Bob's out in an RV and he's got a test schedule and these things. Well, these things, inverted commas. But there is something undeniably in the sky that's difficult to explain, and Bob seems to know. He did.
Yep.
And he seems to know when it's flying. And like you do, you take your mates to see it. Now, obviously, yeah, me too. Listen, we've got to do it one day. Grab an RV, few beers. Let's do it. Dartmouth. We'll camp outside Dartmouth.
We do. Me and James do actually have a plan to do something like that.
Oh, that'd just be amazing.
It's just going to be us screaming for 2 hours, man. That's all it's going to be.
Our plan is to go to a haunted house and do a ghost episode.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
we might actually have to video that one.
Paranormal caught on camera style.
I'm not looking forward to it. But yeah, he has the test schedule.
Blair Witch.
Oh my god, it would do. He has the test schedule, and pretty sure he gets picked up, doesn't he, by some military facility.
He said he was standing there, and then a green light rolled towards him.
And it was the helmet.
Yeah,
it was the night vision of the army soldier. And I'm there like, come on, like, you know.
No, mate. I mean, I've got a friend of mine that I used to work with. His son was in the Marines, and they literally I was asking him questions about, this was just a different topic about like, has he killed people in the jungle and stuff, and he said
Of course.
that they train the Marines in the UK in jungle warfare that they can be 3 foot away from someone without them noticing.
Yeah.
3 foot from someone. You could be, so you could just be stood in the jungle just with your AK-47, and less than half the height of one of us, there could be a military commando just stood next to you waiting to kill you.
See, I'm like 3 foot wide. Good luck with that person.
So I do believe that, you know, that is in the realms of plausibility, at least.
Well, there are witnesses.
There are witnesses. I think a lot of it is, like I've said before, it's just that next level of sci-fi, innit?
Yeah.
Like that almost deniability of being too far-fetched. And just that slight tang of fiction. That's what I'm finding difficult with. But then, like you said, those things get leaked.
That's what hooks you in.
Yeah, it is. It's why the guy is so fascinating.
No, like I said, I watched the stuff intently today, despite the 2-hour nap in between. But like, I did watch it with like far intent, and he is a very charismatic and, you know, alluring guy to listen to. But you know, some of the stuff he comes up with, like, you know, he spoke about there's no right angles, everything's smooth, and all this. When he draws it, he says that the gravitational wells were on rectangular platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that sounds quite right angly to me, pal.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's those little things where if you're sticking to your story, whether you believe it or not, make sure that the little consistency is there. You know, that's why I think he always uses the phrase like radical maneuvers, because that's quite a unique phrase to use. It's almost scripted. It's almost like he was told.
It's like a soundbite.
Yeah, like, you know, like in court, like criminals always use the, you know, same phrases over and over again. Not, you know, not say the crime they did, but like, you know, I was done for aggravated assault, not I beat up a dude. Yeah. Like, you know, he could have said like, oh, they were spinning about the sky, but it's radical maneuvers all the time. You know, it seems that was a phrase he was given to use.
Yeah, and you know, I think there's a big argument that Bob is the kind of perfect patsy a little bit. I mean, he's just scientific enough for some to believe. He's just crazy enough to not believe. He's great for sticking a story out into the public eye. Almost the perfect guy for it, really. I mean, if disinformation is a sprinkling of truth scattered with a whole load of lies, I think you've got Bob's story. I think that's Bob.
He could have been he could have been a professional con man that was hired by the government to spread rumours about Area 51 to get funding to make it more secure.
I think there's a million and one reasons why Bob's...
I think a good idea, because that, like you say, Mike, that is the story of Bob Lazar. Like, that's his story from like the start to then him going on with George Knapp. So there's no point in covering the stuff since then, because really it's been talked about so many times.
Yeah, I mean, the upshot of it was he ends up basically on the run and scared for his life, and that's when he comes out publicly. And
his house was being bugged, and his wife was cheating on him, and there's a lot of like personal stuff that for me it doesn't give any credence to the story, because like his personal life doesn't affect the story for me. Yeah. Like, it's just a caveat. It's like, I've got stuff going on in my personal life. Everyone does, but it doesn't affect like another aspect of your life. So you know, my personal life doesn't affect how I support my football team or something. Yeah. So for me, they're two completely separate things.
I did feel a bit sorry for him when he learned through their bugging of his phone line that his wife had been nailing the pilot. That must have been a pretty bitter pill.
Maybe it was the Nimitz pilot.
Fravor in his early days.
I couldn't help but think, like, he's like, oh, you know, they bugged him because they worried about him blabbing, and he did it anyway.
Yeah,
like he was like, oh, actually, you're bugging my house. I'm gonna tell my friends.
Yeah,
they were right. They were right to be concerned.
Yeah. Well, when he describing like being tailed along like the highway, and he's like, yeah, but it's fine. I had an AK-47 in the boot. Rolls up into this car park outside this gym, and like just hops out and pulls out the AK-47 in readiness for, an assassination attempt that never came. But that's his story. It's kind of like...
It's pure science fiction, but the thing is the reason that it's pure science fiction is because he is the basis of the science fiction.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier, like he's the reason Area 51's famous. He's the reason that Storm Area 51 with all those idiot kids happened a few years ago. He's the reason why Paul, the film, exists. He is...
Cool film, by the way.
It's a great film, but he is that central point of Area 51. I think a really good thing to do now is like sort of digest it, sort of like a mini round table, and we'll all sort of like just in turn what we think of Bob. So I'll just start very quickly. I don't think he's a scientist. He doesn't have a college degree. They're very easy to find a college degree. It's been proven time and time again that the names that he gave of his college professors were actually high school teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's just a bit of a grifter. If I'm honest, I think he's just a bit of a chancer. He's lied about a few credentials. He's got a job at a military facility off the back of a conversation he's had with quite an important person who he's sort of struck up a relationship with. He's in a bit of money problems. He's stressing out. He's paranoid already. He's working on foreign tech, maybe not alien tech, but he's potentially working on some foreign tech or some strange technology. But I believe that he worked on UAP tech. I genuinely do. I don't believe a lot of his story. I don't believe as a person he's a decent person. He was running brothels. He loved guns. He was money laundering. He was borrowing off people he knew he couldn't pay back. He's not a great guy, but if the government wants someone to fall back on, if they do leak stuff and say, well, the guy's a loose cannon, like you said earlier, he's the perfect cannon fodder for that. So yeah. I think, personally, he was working on some pretty out there tech. It may have been recovered parts of crashed vehicles. And I think that they told him enough truth to get the job done, but enough lies to discredit him. And I do think that there was a campaign by the US government to ridicule him, but I don't think he's helped himself. That's the way I'm going to put it. I think there's a lot that he should have been truthful about when he first came out about his story that he's tied himself to now, which is unfortunate. That's my thoughts. That there's stuff that he said when the story first broke that were clear lies that he has to stick to, because if he admits that that's wrong, it could admit that the whole story is wrong. So I think he's rocking a hard place himself in that sense for me. James, what about yourself? Because we've not talked about this at all. This is the first I'm going to know about your opinion.
It comes across like a bit of a con man, if I'm honest. Like, there's easy ways to fake credentials, fake this, fake, if there's proof he works at Area 51, fantastic. I personally haven't seen it, but I trust you guys to,
it's proof. It's not proof specifically that he worked at Area 51. It is proof that he worked for the Office of Naval Intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they are stationed out of Area 51.
Yeah. Whether it's blind luck that this stuff has come post, like him coming out, that, gives credit to his stories. A lot of the people that, especially on the podcast with the Crazy Eyes guys. And
Corbell, yeah.
Yeah, George Knapp reminds me of an NPC from GTA. Especially in the swimming pool thing in the documentary, like what a weird introduction to a character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I thought it was like a effect they put in his voice. I was like, no, they're just filming in a fucking swimming pool.
Third bleep.
Sorry, but like I said, I didn't know much about him. He's a very charismatic man to the point where he's got a banging hot wife now. And then, sorry, my Alexa's going off apparently.
That's all right. It's not the Alexa going off, it's the feds. They're listening.
They're listening.
They abducted you 2 weeks ago.
My hernia's hurting again, Harry.
They abducted you 2 weeks ago and they've implanted something in your hernia.
Yeah, for what he's released, it doesn't seem that new. Like all the stuff that he said, it just seems quite stolen in a way. Like, all the old UFO. It's nothing that he released from working at S4, whatever, is something that's mind-bogglingly amazing.
Well,
I think
I want to sort of blow your mind a little bit, because
please, that's one here.
The way that he describes these craft as moving is that they're sort of standard traditional UFO with the sort of like disc lay flat and the ball at the top, and they raise up and then they tilt and turn and then move sort of like disc forward. Like that's how he describes they move. Well, do you remember a few years ago the Navy the Pentagon released those 3 videos?
Yeah.
And there's one specifically.
Is it the
where
gimbal?
The pilots say the gimbal video where the pilot says it's rotating. Obviously, Mick West has debunked it, and it's obviously just a jet plane 20 miles away because
Mick. I hope he listens to this.
Clearly, F-18 fighter pilots don't know how to identify a plane in the sky, do they, Mick? But you, as a game developer on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, obviously know how a FLIR camera works at 30.
They do know how to make good soundtracks, though.
They know how to make great soundtracks, but they don't know how to operate FLIR cameras at a professional level.
No, fair enough. No.
Here's the thing. The craft in the gimbal video moves almost exactly how Bob Lazar explained it would move.
It does.
Mm-hmm. And that for me, like, they're not directly linked.
A lot of people have argued that point.
It's a completely separate thread that happens to back him up, and it's not
very
something where he's
coincidence,
like, and it's not something where he's like gone, hey, look, here's this thing that I said happened. It's just happened elsewhere, and people have put 2 and 2 together. They've listened to him in documentaries, or they've watched him on TV, or they've read his book, and they've gone, hang on, that gimbal craft is rotating with no inertia, almost exactly the same way as Bob said. And David Fravor has met Bob Lazar. They've met and they've had a conversation. And Chris Mellon, we'll do an episode probably on Chris Mellon. He was the former director of Homeland Security. Is that right?
Yep, that is.
I'm assuming he met David Fravor to speak about having an affair with his wife, right?
Yes. But Chris Mellon is very, very important for the UAP journey that we're going through. He is a former congressman and he is an active sort of like Pentagon employee, former Homeland Security director, and he said there are these craft, and he has had conversations about Bob Lazar, but he doesn't believe all of his story, but he's never outright denied it.
I think it's quite dangerous for anybody in a senior position to even be associated with Bob.
It is, because then
Lou would not have anything to do with the conversation, and you know for a fact that Lou Elizondo knows about Bob Lazar, and yet he denied knowledge of the story in its entirety.
Yeah, he said, I've never even heard of that story before. Of course you have, Lou. You were the director of ATIP. But he's met David Fravor, and they've talked about the craft, and also the way that David Fravor describes the craft as moving like a ping pong in a glass. So there's similarities between some of the things that Bob has said in the past, between what we're now seeing come out. You look at the Ukrainian footage that's been released recently, and that, we're going to talk about that next week on the Roundtable episode, but some of the stuff that's coming out of Ukraine also sort of backs up what Bob's saying, because he did say back in the 90s that they travelled in fleets. And now we're seeing in Ukraine these things travelling in fleets. And there's always those little bloody breadcrumbs. That's the thing, James. There's always these breadcrumbs that drag you back into Bob's story.
You can never escape it. You can't escape it.
No.
One thing that did sort of not. You guys obviously know far more than me about this, but he always talks about the aircraft going belly up.
Yeah, that's what I mean by the way it moves, and that's how that.
I'm trying to think how that logically makes sense.
Basically, imagine picking up a plate, and you mean why would it do that?
Yeah, no, I get how there's all the
semantics,
the gravitational wells at the bottom of the craft, and then it tilts itself so the gravitational wells are pointing in the direction it wants to go.
Yeah,
but why don't you just move the gravitational wells to the front of the ship?
I mean, if we're to believe the story, it's alien tech. So we don't know that.
Yeah, I just don't know if you guys had an opinion or a thought of how logically that makes sense.
For me personally, I don't think it makes a difference, because if you said to someone 200 years ago, "Oh, we've got these things, and they've got like long sticks that come off the side of them, and they're on wheels, and then if you get them really fast, they fly. But when they fly, sort of like the wheels stop turning, and then you've got these like things like big blades at the front that like spin around, and they spin around. But even though those things are spinning around at the front, it's actually like the big wingy things on the side that keep the thing up. Like that wouldn't make sense, would it?
Yeah.
No, but then everything is aimed at automatically aimed in the direction of things going.
Helicopters aren't. Describe a helicopter to someone 300 years ago.
They go up, then you tilt the thing forward, but not completely on its belly. That's why
I get where you're coming from.
I was just a bit like, logically, I was there like, I can't think of a way, like, if the way he described it, the seats are sort of like set around the gravitational well themselves, they're just facing up. Space. Like it's like like when the rockets launch into space, they're lying horizontally, aren't they? So when they hit space, they level out.
But then, if you think about if you're creating a gravity well, it's not you that's moving. That's the thing. It's everything. It's space time.
It's being pulled towards.
Everything else is being pulled towards you because you are manipulating space time. So the way that you're facing, like the famous phrase is, "There's no up in space." Like the only reason that we have a north is because we've attributed the way that magnetic rocks point as north.
Yeah.
So there is no up in space. And so if these things have come from somewhere else, possibly the disk could be used as a solar sail. So Oumuamua was an object that came through our solar system a few years ago. Dr. Avi Loeb, Harvard professor, thinks that it was an alien craft. He thinks that it was a very long sail, basically, and that the gamma rays coming from the sun would hit it, sort of like a wind, and would push it forward. And so maybe if they're traveling through space with these craft, and they're creating gravity wells, and it's facing a certain way, maybe if you slow down enough, maybe then solar waves would sort of, or even gravity waves, if Bob did speak about gravity waves.
There's been an argument with that we would have noticed with the amount of gravity that we're talking, that there would have been noticeable distortions because of the effect that would have on larger objects around. So
so maybe it sort of like tilts, so it's like a sail pushing it, because that's how a boat works, isn't it? You've got a big sail that faces up and the wind, but like that doesn't logically in my mind make sense. You point the sail one way and it goes another, like, and
until they wheel these things out and say here it is.
Yeah.
I'd say I was just trying to think of the logistics and how in my brain I was like, I don't get it.
For me, there's no up in space, so it doesn't matter what way you're facing. No. And it could just be that is then used as like a solar sail, just so that you could preserve some energy and you just let sort of like the gamma rays do their business. But I get what you mean. It's a bit strange, but then the gimbal craft moves in that way, so it's in that way, like, it
gives credit to it, doesn't it?
It ties it back round. So very skeptical, James. Understandable. I'm very skeptical. Mike, what about yourself?
Well,
where do you draw that line?
I think I'm probably perfectly aligning with what both of you have said with this. The big thing for me is the academic credentials, or lack of. But I also think Bob's got the opportunity at any second to prove that his entire story is true, because all he has to do is bob into the back, pull out the old tin full of element 115, and say, "Case closed, guys. I win." The whole really, really cringy scene in the Corbell documentary where they're out in that wood as if they've got to be in the middle of nowhere so that these secret services.
Oh, is that when it's like turn your phone? So it's like turn your phone off. Turn your phone off.
And then there's this like flash forward, and Bob's. It's intimated that Bob has told him, and it kind of ends and wraps up. And I'm like, Bob, just get the element 115.
See, I don't know if either of you will get this reference, but what that bit of the film reminds me of. Did either of you watch that Mitchell and Webb look?
Yes.
No.
So there is an end of show gag where
that's a bad miss.
Where Webb comes in and he's like, "I've got a really good sketch to do with this banana," and David Mitchell's like, "What do you mean you got a good sketch?" And Robert Webb's like, "I'll show you. It's really funny. Let me just turn the camera on." And he walks up to the camera and turns it off because he doesn't realise it's still rolling. And then like 5 seconds later, he's really out of breath with a mouthful of bananas. And then David Mitchell's just like, no, I don't really like it very much. And like that's what that bit of the documentary reminded me of. I'll have to send it to you. It's so
just
funny.
so dreadful. That
And it just reminded me of the banana sketch in that Mitchell and Webb look, where he's just like, I've got this funny idea. Let me show you. And then, it just cuts to him with a mouthful of bananas, panting frantically, sweating profusely. It's so ridiculous. But that's the thing about Bob's story, is it's so ridiculous that I love it. It's so bonkers and out there.
Yeah, please don't let my cynicism come across as not being interested, because I really am.
No,
100%.
I think it's the natural reaction to Bob's story if you've never heard it before.
Yeah.
The thing is that like I talked about it before.
It entertained me. Like,
yeah,
that's what it is. It's such an entertaining story.
And for me, even if maybe it's not all true, it's entertaining enough that it's getting people to want to look into the subject more. So even if there's a few little white lies in there, it's intriguing enough for someone to be like, Area 51, what's all that about? Oh,
yeah, I think Bob's the guy that pulls people into that story.
He's a gateway drug to UFOs. That's the way that I would explain him. He's that little like, I'll just have a taster. And then you have a taste and you're like, this is amazing.
He is. And it does not take long and much delving into Bob's story to realise that there are just ginormous... I should not say ginormous. I used to get told off for saying that because it's not a word.
No, it's fine. I like it. Ginormous. I'm going to say ginormous from now on. It's ginormous.
I'm going to say ginormous.
There you go.
Vaginanormous.
Gigantanormous. Gigantanormous hole.
Do
you know what's so beautiful about the story as well? Go on YouTube, watch a body language expert. Bob is convinced by his story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bob is sold by his own story. Now, I can't decide whether that's narcissism because I can't...
Yeah, it's the mark of a sociopath.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, sociopaths won't yawn when you yawn because they don't feel empathy, so they're so convinced by their own lies or anything like this. To them, it's the truth. It's delusion.
I think in Bob's mind, Bob's story is the truth. Whether that's literal or not.
Yes, I agree with that.
Might be a different thing altogether, but Bob is sold on Bob. And another thing as well, kind of tying into the whole narcissism, sociopath thing, is for someone that does not like attention, he loves attention.
He loves it.
He's like, stop filming me, guys, for this hit Netflix documentary.
During that Rogan podcast, he was there like, why am I here? Oh, my migraine. But he's in like a completely lit studio.
Well, I loved as well.
One thing I know about migraines is you can't be in light.
And Joe Rogan's not exactly the person you want to be around with a migraine.
No. He just trying to get him drunk all the time.
Joe Rogan's not the sort of person you want to be around while you're breathing. So.
Yeah, he just smells like protein powder and testosterone, doesn't he? I couldn't get over the fact that Bob Lazar looks like Stephen King, and that
he does.
I've thought so many times.
I was there like, he's one of the most credible story writers of our time. Like,
of course, it would sound realistic.
Yeah.
Apparently, on the Rogan podcast, there was this big deal made about the fact that he'd paid for his own plane ticket. A week later, he's selling hand signed the drawings you will ever see in your life, pardon my French, of the sport model, signed by Bob Lazar for $80 a pop.
Yeah. And he's like, I've never made money from this, but if you want to buy my autobiography
I've
watch
got an
the
autobiography endorsed by George Knapp. I've got a documentary with Mickey Rourke, and I'm selling hand-designed
here's me presenting my own VHS in the 90s, but I didn't make any money from it while I'm sat in my literal mansion
with my hot wife.
Yeah, with a hot he basically has money, and he just comes across as a bit smug. And like you said, if he believes his own story, that's great. But it just comes across as he doesn't want to hear other theories or opinions.
Yeah.
And it's almost like he's a victim of his own story.
Yeah,
and
that's what a wonderful way of putting it. Yeah, it is. I'd love to be honest, him debating Gary Nolan.
That is like as good a description as I think that anyone can say.
Yeah,
he is a victim of his own story.
I think that kind of wraps up Bob's story just so beautifully well.
I think that wraps up the episode. I really enjoyed
Absolutely.
it, but I feel like we would just be treading the same ground now. I think we're all in a healthy, skeptical point where we may or may not believe a lot of it. But more than anything, like James, what I would say, James, is having clearly you don't believe all of his story. You're very skeptical of him. You're very ambivalent of what's gone on. However, does it make you want to look into UFOs more?
I mean, this last month, just scaringly feel, like I said, tiny.
Does his story make you think, oh, that's actually really interesting stuff? Like, for me, that's all that matters.
I just feel like he should have got a job on Independence Day 2. Probably would have been a bit better story.
Jesus, it might have made it a bit better. Wow.
But would you say that it's enough to like pique the curiosity of someone?
Oh God, like Mike said, it's a fantastic story. Like there's no denying, and I just feel like he got the job at Area 51, and he went, it's quite. It wasn't as secretive, but it's still quite like a secret organization almost. It's an army base. Let's make something of this.
Yeah.
I feel like for me personally, that's what's happened. Is
he took an inch and he made it a mile.
Yeah, he's narcissistic. He's narcissistically gone.
An element of the fantasist.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
And then, because narcissism can come not later in life. It's something you can gain. So, like, people not realize they're narcissists. Something will happen, then they realize I can take this. All about me. It's all about me.
And I think when you're that far into a story, it's very difficult to backtrack.
Yeah.
I just feel like, he's always like, shy away from the camera and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, you love it, mate. Sorry, beep. Like, you love it.
By the way, James, don't ever feel like you don't have to swear, because it's very easy.
Oh, no, because this entire thing would have sounded like a Nicki Minaj song on the radio else. But, like, it just, the two things I watched about it, like, the Jeremy Corbyn guy just came across as a bit fanatical, a bit. George Knapp came across as well. Like,
don't watch the David Fravor Joe Rogan then, because he's in that and he's even worse.
But for me, Jeremy Corbell, the worrying thing about him is he never blinks.
During that Rogan podcast, he's like, I just want to cement the facts. Like, he had to always go back and reiterate what he said before to make it like. I was there, like, just stick to your point.
The Wilson memo is real, guys. Like, I'm telling you, it's real. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's real. It's definitely real. And they're like, yeah, but what are you talking about? No, it's real, guys.
It's real. It's real. Yeah. And plus, I couldn't get over the fact that he missed a bit of his haircut, and that really annoyed me. If you watch it again, there's a bit right on his crown that he forgot to shave, and it's really annoying.
Obviously, did not make enough money from Bob.
Yeah, cut the victim of his own story. Like,
get Bob knocking some more sketches out for everybody.
So I think now that you've ruined any chance that I've got of ever getting Jeremy Corbell on the show, James, I think that's as good.
If he wants to come on, get a fucking haircut.
Yeah,
yeah, for our audio-only podcast. Yeah.
I will tell. I won't be able to know.
Jeremy, just in case you're listening, learn to lubricate your eyes, dude. We'll have you.
Yeah. Honestly, feel free. If you learn how to blink in the next few weeks, let me know, and I'll gladly have you on.
Convince me, Corbyn.
Thank you very much, Mike, for coming on.
Oh, guys, it's truly been my pleasure.
We had some technical difficulties to start with.
Yeah, we got past.
My microphone broke as we started recording.
Don't put we on that one, Harry.
No, I solely, just me.
There is an irony that we'll not go too far into, about the fact that my mic's actually been pretty perfect.
Yeah, and I'm the guy that's been messaging with you for the last 3 weeks, giving you
which I am, by the way, extremely grateful for.
And I couldn't even get a microphone to work. So yeah, no, it's been great to have you, Mike. How can people find you?
It's UAPs and Yorkshire Tea on Spotify and on Instagram, and fingers crossed if I can be bothered to get my finger out a little bit more on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook only works for us because I got loads of free advertising from it. I wouldn't stress too much. I'd say the most important thing is just do this. Just come on people's show.
Do you know really what, guys? It's been amazing. I've really, really enjoyed it, and it's just been great to chill and hang out with you guys and talk about what we love.
Yeah, we'll do. We'll probably do a few more episodes like this based on individual people. I know that we're going to do a Lou Elizondo episode. We are definitely going to do a Richard Doty episode.
I would love to come back for that one.
The snake. We'll
invitation, Mike.
Yeah, no, genuinely, open invitation for that episode. And really, thank you all for listening. If you are still sticking around, probably about the hour and 10-minute mark. So thank you all for listening. James, as always, it's great to terrify you with all this stuff. So thank you for coming with us.
I'm dry this episode. It's all good.
That's all right. Well, next week, just to give people an idea, we are going to be doing our first roundtable episode. We are potentially going to be getting in a few guests to talk about sort of like the last month of news within UAPs. I've also got an idea where I'm going to get a few sightings from Reddit. Because I am notorious on the UFO subreddit. Mike, are you on Reddit at all?
I am indeed.
Do you know the UFOs subreddit at all? Are you on that?
I am not.
So there's it's R UFOs, so UFOS, and it's the biggest UFO subreddit, and I am the top post of all time.
I am checking that out literally as we speak.
It's my claim to fame. I am the top post of all time on the main UFO subreddit for debunking a guy who tried to convince other people that a light mast in fog was a UFO. So we will be going through...
So checking that out.
We'll be going through some stuff on Reddit. We'll be going through some stuff in the news. There's been some big stuff happening in Ukraine. And I hope that you all tune in next Friday, on your podcast platform of choice. And join us for a little roundtable. And if you like that, we'll do a few more of them. So thank you very much, everybody. And we'll see you next week.